Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jennifer Scott, and I'm delighted to have been asked to chair this online event for OGV Energy, where we will explore various topics around how digital transformation is affecting the energy sector. Before we get started, I would like to thank OGV Energy for organising this vital discussion, and I would also like to take a moment to thank our main sponsors for today's event. Firstly, our gold sponsor, FutureOn, a digital technology company based in Oslo, who are supporting energy companies' subsea field development projects through the use of their cloud-based platform, Field Twin. And secondly, our silver sponsor, GDI, who provide ultra-efficient technology solutions which support the safety, integrity, and cost challenges to operators in the UKCS basin. They have in-house survey, design, engineering, fabrication, construction, and inspection capability. The structure of today's event will be a panel session from now until around 3:20, followed by a networking session until 4:30. I'm joined today by 6 expert panelists who are driving digitalization and innovation in the industry, both nationally and internationally. I'd like to welcome Christian Muller, Chief Product Officer at Aize. Aize are building the industrial workspace of the future, a digital twin that will cover both building and operation of your assets. Next, we have Colin Dawson, Digitalization and Business Transformation Manager at Stena Drilling, who's been a driving force behind Stena's digitalization strategy. Our next panelist is Gareth McIntyre, Director at GDI, our silver sponsor, who I mentioned earlier. And we also have Stuart Harvey, Digital Innovation Manager at ProServe, who leads ProServe's strategy for harnessing digital technology to expand and evolve its solutions in current and new markets. Moving along, we have Jared Owen, Digital Director at Sword Group, who leads Sword's digital services and solutions capability and is responsible for their support of the energy industry on its data-driven journey. And last, but by no means least, we have Gregor Deans, Customer Success Manager and Subsea Technical Specialist at FutureOn, our gold sponsor for the event. Most of today's panelists feature in this month's edition of OGV Energy magazine, so I would encourage you all to look it up on the OGV Energy website if you would like to learn more about what our guests are doing in this space. My role at Opportunity Northeast is in the digital team. We work in partnership with leading organisations to understand and accelerate the application of digital within the energy sector and run a number of programmes to support this. Our aim is to help the sector embrace digital technology as a key enabler to shape the future of energy. Digital transformation is a big topic to cover in just over an hour. My hope is that the discussion this afternoon will be valuable to you, whatever stage of the journey your company is at. We've broken the session down into a few main topics, and we're keen to hear your thoughts and questions as the discussion progresses. So please feel free to drop some questions in the Q&A section at the right-hand side of your screen. I'll try to pick those up as we go along and at the end of the session. So, down to business. Last year, the Technology Leadership Board, working in partnership with Opportunity Northeast, Oil and Gas UK and the Net Zero Technology Centre, launched the first UKCS Data and Digital Survey Report, which helped us to better understand the attitudes, strategies and progress of different companies across the industry with regards to their respective digital journeys. This work was supplemented in 2021 by direct operator and supply chain company engagement to get a better understanding of the sector pain points and innovation opportunities. The results, which were published recently, show that while the digital journey is well underway, the sector has not yet fully embraced the transformation required for a true step change in performance. To do this, we have to think about the entire digital ecosystem working together in new ways in pursuit of real and measurable goals. The Northeast region, the energy sector and the digital sector have invested heavily in this collaborative future in a variety of ways. For example, through the Offshore Energy 4.0 initiatives from the NZTC Solutions Centre, through the One Tech Hub in the heart of the city for our digital community, and through the Data, Digital and Technology Partnership between the OGA, OGUK, NZTC, Opportunity Northeast, the OR Catapult and Scottish Enterprise. When this group met to talk about and plan today's session, 4 natural themes came out in our discussion. What digital transformation really means, the challenges faced around the people side, and the emerging tech we see coming through which can change the way we work. Every discussion came back to the importance of data and its management. So we'd like to bring all 4 topics to you today and hope that they inspire you to share your views and participate in the discussion. We'll begin the conversation today looking at digital transformation as a whole. If you ask a group of people what they think digital transformation is, you'll get lots of different answers. It's a phrase that's thrown around loosely and means different things to different people. For some, it could be adoption of a piece of digital tech to meet an operational goal, while for others, the integration of tech into all areas of their business, fundamentally changing how they operate and delivering value to their customers. So for a business, it can be difficult to know where to begin your journey and how to identify the goals you want to achieve. I'm going to come to you first, Stuart, and pose to you perhaps the hardest question of the day. What is digital transformation?
Yeah, thanks, Jen, and also thanks for inviting me here. It's great to be here. Yeah, and what a question to start as well, of course. So yeah, you're absolutely right. You ask many different people, and you'll always get, or quite commonly get, different views of opinions on that. So I'm happy to give my view on it, and that is when I step back and really think about this question, I'm not entirely sure that the word transformation is what we're actually seeing and have gone through and are continuing to go through. The word transformation suggests that there's a start point and a finish point, and I'm not sure anyone today could say what completed digital transformation is or looks like. Personally, what I believe we're going through is, and have been actually for a number of decades, is a digital evolution. And by that, what I mean is we've really felt the need to give it a name, digital transformation, because the intensity in which we're adopting digital technology has intensified so much. We've simply felt the need to give it a name. And that intensity has increased for a number of reasons. First of all, there's lots of new technology that's coming into not just the energy industry, but also other industries, which is fantastic. And that's, obviously digital orientated technology I'm talking about. And secondly, that technology is becoming more accessible and more affordable to many companies. And I think if you look back at history, there's a lot of examples where that's already happened. So if you take a step back and look at the energy industry and take engineering as a segment, which I think is a good example, because as an industry, we've always been inherently reliant upon engineering to do what we do. And if you think about it, before I started my career, there were companies that were doing engineering work, and they would literally have a floor of people that would do design drawings by hand on paper. And there then became a phase where, for example, computers became affordable, and then 2D software was then developed, and then that became adopted by those engineering houses, those companies, which are now EPCs or equally operators for that matter. And that adoption and evolution hasn't stopped. 3D CAD modeling became the latest software to have, and that became adopted because it gave those companies additional benefits. And I'll come back to those benefits in a minute. And then obviously finite element analysis, that became the next thing, and modeling and simulating. So that evolution has never stopped when you look at just the segment of engineering. And now, of course, there's new technologies coming in, such as the ability to scan an entire platform and produce a fabrication drawing to basically your as-built documentation or your drawings that you need to do fabrication work. That is now evolving, such as what GDI has. That is now evolving and moving all the time. In the same way that FME, finite element analysis models you could argue that a digital twin, and again, I know that's a term that has many different meanings, right? So don't shoot me. But effectively, models and modeling has always been a thing. It's just that they're now evolving to be real-time models that are attached to an asset and accessing that data. And that's just the continued evolution of that. It's never had a starting point in recent history, even though the term digital transformation is quite a new one. So the question really is, well, what do all of those things have in common? And fundamentally, yes, they are all loosely digital technology orientated things. But the bottom line is, for that transition, if we use the word transition, to happen, there had to be a robust business case behind them to make them justifiable. There had to be benefits to the business. So in summary, for me, what digital transformation is all about is about making continuous improvements to your business, which in this case leverages digital technology, which in turn delivers either it saves you time or money, it generates additional money or improves your margin, or overall it gives you as a business a competitive advantage or improves your market share. So for me, digital transformation is bundled into all of those things in order for it to become effectively real.
Brilliant. Thanks, Stuart. I'm going to turn to you now, Jared. Does that ring true for you? What does this mean from a customer's perspective? How do you help them to understand the value they can achieve and go about developing a strategy?
Yeah, thanks, Jen, and also thanks for inviting us to the session today. I really liked Stuart's answer, actually, and in order to sort of answer that specific question that you've put to me, let me sort of tell you how we kind of got to the point that allows us to go to businesses to help understand how you do start to develop that strategy. So, as both of you have pointed out, digital transformation means many things to many people. For me, digital transformation is just today's version of corporate transformation. You can't undertake corporate transformation today, however, without taking into account the digital landscape, but also the culture change, together with the new ways of working required to adopt it in the right way and increase your digital maturity across the organization. So with this in mind, I look at it in a way of digital adoption and maturity. And these are broken down by SWORD into 3 interlinked pillars of data, more specifically, the business insights and decisions that can be derived from it. Cloud platforms that allow you to connect, to integrate and analyze data from multiple sources. And lastly, those systems of intelligence, those business applications that allow you to capture, to visualize, and to interrogate the data for decision making. If I then come to the specific sort of question you had, Jen, around bringing that topic to the business, I'll keep it sort of high level, otherwise we can start unpacking quite a lot. We break it down into 3 layers, and we start with the business outcome. Now, for most, this is the ability to make data-driven decisions. The critical starting point here is that you must engage the business to understand their wants and needs. You simply can't shortcut this process. It's vital that you have the key stakeholder interviews, conduct the workshops across the various lines of business. The output of this exercise is a good understanding of the direction the business wants to go, the pain points that they're experiencing, and ultimately where digital technology and processes can improve their way of working. Then we take a look at the second layer and uncover how the organization wants to capture and to manage data that's required to make those decisions through smart tools from modern business applications and digital processes, all the way through to manage digital assets and data hubs. Lastly, we look at what enabling this type of environment would look like for an organization in a secure and compliant cloud platform. Now, for SWORD, as a Microsoft Gold partner, we prefer to work in the Azure cloud environment, augmented with Microsoft 365. That particular technology stack is widely used and familiar in today's business environment, but of course, there's alternatives available, whether that be through AWS or Google or others. Once you've gone through that 3-layer approach, you generally have a good starting point on how to build your strategy and ultimately the roadmap that helps you achieve it.
Great, thanks, Jared. Interested to turn now to looking at what's difficult about that, and looking a bit more at sort of the barriers to digital transformation. And I'm going to come to you next, Gareth. You're part of the Energy Tech programme, which is a partnership between Barclays Codebase and One, which is a bridge programme to connect early stage businesses with the major players in the energy industry. And the aim of that is to learn from each other, drive digital transformation and culture change. And I know that barriers are discussed frequently in the sessions for that. What are the main barriers that you see in the sector that programmes like Energy Tech are trying to address?
Yeah, thanks, Jen. The Energy Tech Eagle Labs programme is an interesting one, actually. It's the first one into the oil and gas industry and the first steps. And at the moment, it's more about learning and identifying those barriers, like the question you went through. From my point of view, and to echo what Stuart and Jared had said, specifically Stuart, actually, so the industry has been digitally transforming for a long time, since the advent of computing, effectively. So, albeit glacial, you could call it that. And what we're seeing now is extreme acceleration of that. It's now become a thing. We have a panel session today to talk about that thing. It's now functional within organisations. There's digital departments, etc. So, it undoubtedly, and Jared's even broken that down into sub-elements of digital transformation. And it's a significant opportunity for specifically the oil and gas industry. We've got a very high bar for innovation. I mean, as engineers, we're a predominant workforce, as Stuart pointed out. We're innovating all the time. We're solving novel problems as being engineers. So the opportunity with the advent and the acceleration, and there's many factors driving that: business efficiencies, downturns, COVID, government bodies accelerating that speed. The opportunities to embrace are significant. And I think the question of barriers, and I'm ultimately optimistic in this space, purely due to my personal experiences. There's very little barriers actually now. There was, undoubtedly. That was pretty much due to absence of strategy. Jared mentioned the word strategy. We now have the end clients, the end users with digital strategies. And so they are, from the top down, effectively engaging and searching for value. Supply chain are fully saturated. There is so much in this space at the moment. So undoubtedly, the supply chain has a task to identify and search for value to feed back into that strategy. And that is, you could perceive that as a barrier because it's actually a bottleneck effectively. But through sessions like this, through service companies talking about what they're developing, and through supply chain searching for that, undoubtedly value's found. But that premise has always been the same in the oil and gas industry, regardless of digital transformation. Supply chain searching for value and service companies promoting it is fundamentally the same. So with regards to barriers, I'm an optimist that they are there, but they're surmountable.
Great, nice to hear such an optimistic viewpoint. Now we just have a couple of minutes before we move on to the next topic, but if anyone else in the panel would like to comment, please just raise your hand. Yep, Gregor?
Yeah, I think the oil industry, we're not very famous for sprinting, but I think with the digital transformation, I think it was a bit of a marathon. We decided to sprint right at the start. So there was a lot of announcements of digital transformation and huge investment, but I don't think we were ready. I don't think we'd sort of identified both on maybe the customer side and the supplier side how to show the value of these tools. And I think there was maybe a rush to do something without maybe having some of the foundations in place, understanding the sort of digital landscape. And I really, want to pick up on Gareth's point about this sort of working together and community approach. That there's not going to be one solution that an operator or a customer can take that will cover every digital need. So we need to make sure we can get the right microservices from Jared's team. We can get, the inspection information from Gareth. We can get umbilical power monitoring from Stuart, and bring it all together rather than all go back to our zones and claim that we can transform on our own. So I think these groups and the support of the OGV and other groups is essential for that kind of thing.
Thanks. Well, that's a lovely way to finish off that theme, I think, to discuss the collaboration. So we'll move on now more to the people side of digital transformation and some statistics. So our survey had showed us that only about half of the companies engaged have digital roles identified within their organisations, and that only 36% of companies, mostly the very large organisations, were providing skills and capability programmes. Now, without having these roles in place, it can be hard for a business to quantify what the business's development needs are. And so today, it would be good to discuss the challenges that digital transformation brings in this area, whether it's finding the right people, upskilling and training staff, or looking at the culture within the business. So Colin, I'm going to come to you first on this one. How challenging is the people side of digital transformation for the energy supply chain?
I think that the people side is probably the hardest, because it's all across the entire organization, from executive leadership down through the ranks, through middle management, into everyone working in day-to-day jobs. And for digital transformation to be successful, it really needs to be led from the top. And I think the conversation around what is digital transformation is fascinating, because to me, you're transforming your entire business to be a digital business. I really like, Starbucks see themselves as a digital business that sells coffee. Aker BP in Norway are a digital technology business that happens to work in oil and gas. And that really means transforming your business with a new ethos of what you're going to be in the future. So that really needs strong, effective leadership from the top. When you then look at skills across the organization and preparing your organization for that, there's so many areas that people need to skill up on, whether it's in data analysis, software development, cybersecurity, agile, scrum, lean. There's about 18 different paths that someone can take, and it can get really confusing for people to think, should I learn AWS? Should I learn Azure? What path do people kind of want to go down? And that's where we need, again, strong leadership and guidance to work with people to define the paths forward for the future. Because people don't know which path to take. And we're in that difficult kind of scenario where people need to be brave and step up and think, what can I learn today? Careers now are no longer you go on a job for life. Careers are more you take a job on a continuous learning journey for the rest of your life. And the ethos for work has changed. Even the way we learn has changed. No longer do I have to remember many things. I can just quickly pick up my phone, go on Google, and I get all the answers. So the world of work has changed quite significantly, and it will change more in the future. So how do we find the right people? How do we skill them with the tools that they need? And what does the world of work look like in 2030 and beyond? Because I feel it's going to be vastly different to what it is today, and the rate of change of skills is going to happen faster than we can even imagine.
Absolutely, and I think big challenge there for the universities to keep up with that and be producing graduates who are able to move into that world of work. Gareth, as a tech company, I know you find it challenging to recruit to digital roles yourself. Would you like to give us your thoughts on this area? Yeah,
absolutely. Specifically as well, and I talked about acceleration and some of the factors involved in that in the oil and gas, and you could then therefore talk about the local area of Aberdeen. COVID completely transformed that landscape. We are now, as a business, and it is astonishing, competing with the likes of Facebook and LinkedIn and Google for similar style resources. We never thought we'd be in that place, undoubtedly, but that is the reality now. And I truly believe that's only dawning on some companies, and therefore the greater industry now. So there is a challenge there. You look at the oil and gas industry and the spotlight that is fully on us now, that is an additional challenge. And for GDI as a business, we have to think very carefully about how do we position ourselves to be ultimately attractive to the skill sets that we require. It's no problem, an oil and gas, a mature oil and gas industry. I'll go back to engineering. some of the greatest minds in engineering work in the oil and gas industry. With the advent of tech and digital, there is challenges there, undoubtedly. And going back to build upon what Colin was saying, I think the strategy element for the larger businesses, if they get a clear strategy, what is the business strategy and how does digital fit into that? Then hopefully then it becomes clear down that path about what resources are required and why. And on the other side, for the smaller entities, the smaller businesses, do they have a strategy? They can have technology, they can have ideas, but without a strategy, it's a very difficult landscape to navigate and be successful in. And that's what I've seen being a small business growing into a larger business. We've gone through that pain on both sides effectively.
Thanks. So, we've kind of had a look at that piece about finding people from external. But Stuart, I'd like to come to you now and look at that culture piece with the people that are already there within your organisation. How do you get buy-in from staff to embrace digital projects and to look to this area with enthusiasm?
Yeah, sure. It's a very tough question, particularly when you come to do implementation work or try and get a first initiative off the ground, because inherently people don't like change. So for me, and I've gone through many learnings with this, being in this process myself as being part of that leader of implementing our digital strategy. So my main advice would be make sure your initiatives are user-led. Get them involved early. Get their input on what they think the problems are, or how you think a solution or technology you think could resolve their problem. So that would be my number one piece of advice, and I've seen that go wrong many times. So I've been part of that failing as well, because I haven't done that enough myself. I think a really good example of that sort of pre-digital transformation is ERP implementation and integration. I think there's a lot of things we can learn from doing those initiatives that are relevant to what we're trying to do now in terms of what we call digital transformation. The second piece of advice that I would give is focus on the high value areas, because that will keep your shareholders happy, but it will also keep the people that are involved happy as well. Because particularly if you end up going down a path of doing a partnership type of arrangement, quite often at some point people within your organization will say, well, hang on a minute, why aren't we doing that in-house? That whole build or buy mentality. So it's very important to get the engagement on those two things, the user input and the effectively the value for the org, tucked away early on, because that will really help bring those people along with you. And also, get used to being uncomfortable, right? Because it will be. That's fundamentally the biggest learning I've taken as well is, and when you are uncomfortable, don't be scared to take some risks as well. Because if you're already uncomfortable, try different things to overcome whatever those challenges or barriers are. And the other thing is be really good at sales, because effectively, if you're the leader of a digital strategy in your org, effectively you're a salesperson, because you want people in your org to be the ones that are invested and wanting to do the initiatives that are in your strategy. So you have to sell it to them, and that obviously comes back to the first 2 points as well. So yeah, I could talk about that all day, but that's essentially how I see the skills that are needed to gain that traction, and also some of the examples of some of the challenges and barriers.
Thanks. I think it's really helpful to hear those examples. And before I open up to the panel to see if anyone else would like to contribute, just like to say to the audience, please submit your thoughts on this, your questions on this. I'm faced with a big box there saying be the first to ask a question, and you'll all be faced with that box as well. So please do be the first person to ask the question, and we can pose it to the panel. But to the panel, does anyone else have anything they'd like to comment? Yeah, Jared, on you go.
Thanks, Jen. Stuart actually touched on this one. Sort of, if you're leading on a digital strategy, you need to become a salesperson. I think there's a sales and marketing challenge across the whole industry at the moment with regards to attracting that sort of talent. And if you look at the Northeast alone, I think we have nearly 350 computing, digital and data undergraduates and postgraduates sort of coming out of our 2 universities a year, not to forget our Northeast College as well. The majority of these students are choosing to leave the region once they've graduated because they don't see the career opportunities in the industries that we have here. And that's a real shame, because there's a real need for those skills and those characteristics to help the industry go through its transition. The same challenge applies to attracting some of the more mature talent into the region and into the energy industry as well. I think both the digital sector and the energy industry has to do a better job of articulating why those individuals, why those skills are in real need within the industry. We've got a lot of work to do. The transition that the industry has to go through is going to need a different type of thinking. It's going to need a better understanding of the data. It's going to need a different view as to what this industry should be. And those types of skills can play a huge part in that. So, and it comes back to, we have to market better. We're no longer going to attract those types of resources based on our brand or even historically the types of salaries that we used to pay. We're going to have to come up with a different message.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting one, and for this audience, that oil and gas is not a popular choice for the young people coming through university, and so I think there is that a big marketing piece to do there. Right, there's a comment come through. So we've got time for a quick question. I'll fit this one in from Doug Robertson. With the shortage of digital skill sets available, combined with increase in remote working, do we see this becoming more of a global marketplace for talent? Would anybody like to address that point? Stuart? Yep, sorry.
Yeah, I think it is already. Traditionally, we would have, in ProServe, we would typically have sites that were very strong or very good at doing certain things, particularly when I think about our research and development part of our business. Typically, a lot of that's been based in Norway, software engineering, software development, and some time ago, just before COVID, effectively, we already saw and recognized that needed to change. So we started to look for the same skill sets, but much further afield. They didn't no longer have to be based at all in this site, because we found that it was very difficult to find those particular skill sets that we needed as an organization to not just maintain what it is that we're doing, but also not get left behind, to continue to evolve. And we've seen benefits in that as well. You pull in talent from other industries and other areas of the world, and they bring in new insights that people haven't previously had before because of either their previous work experience or the industries that they've been in. So yes, and it is, and yes, I think there's huge benefits in doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I think as at the One Tech Hub, we're certainly aware of the different way that people are working now, and that teams are distributed internationally, and we're having to change our office setups and offerings to meet that need. So it's certainly a great opportunity. Just in terms of time, I'm now going to move on to the emerging tech side of digital transformation, and a look to the future. Now, 3 of the businesses represented on the panel today are actually digital twin companies. So I just like to think that we've actually got some digital triplets on our panel, and actually nice looking at them. They're the 3 with the beard. I don't know if it's like a familial resemblance between our digital triplets, but I'm going to come to them for this section. So digital twin is another of these very difficult to understand terms, and so I'm going to come to each of you quickly and ask you to give us a short and simple answer. What is a digital twin? Gregor, we'll come to you first.
Thanks for that great introduction. I'm now going to go back and get my DNA check. Make sure I'm not DNA linked to Gareth above me. So yeah, I mean, it's probably the worst after digital transformation. It's probably the most abused term there is. What we have with Field Twin is it's called a digital twin platform. Really, it's a visualization of a digital twin. So we see there's a sort of foundation, which is the data, and that could be metadata, it could be models, supporting documentation that builds up the digital twin. And we're trying to align with sort of industry standards, with the Capital Exchange, the CFOS groups, and the OSDU to look at the standard data models around the digital twin. And then there's tools on top of it. And I think that gets, how you use the digital twin is then the next step. And I think in some cases we've gone to that next step before having the structure and the tools and platforms in place to really have the digital twin. I think that's changed a lot in the last maybe year or two. I think certainly the oil and gas operators are now very focused on having what maybe it's a data lake for some. You see Equinor's Omnia platform. We see a lot of digital twin style data within ArcG's mapping platforms. So there's a lot of information out there. I think the digital twins are being developed. I think for oil and gas, we're probably as usual last, and we're maybe catching up. And the danger is we have a lot of engineers with beards and grey hair trying to understand an industry that we haven't been involved in that much before. So it goes back to maybe the upskilling, where we need to bring in people that have the competencies from other industries. We need to admit that we don't have all the answers, and we're all learning. We need for us in future on the biggest word at the moment is collaboration. It's about integrations and collaborations, that no one group are going to have all the answers. So we see with the foundation of the twin, with the data set behind it, that gives you the ability to build on top of it. And that's where we're sort of reaching out to some of the people here. There's the fantastic intelligent plant guys, who I think Stuart also has worked with. That this way of maybe bringing in competencies outside through a digital platform allows you to not necessarily have all the technologies and all the knowledge in your own team. You don't all have to be cloud experts. You don't all have to be standards experts, but you can create platforms and tools that allow you to link to the people that are. And I think, just to finish, I think the operators have now got a much better idea of how they would like to use digital twins, particularly more on the operation side. And they're bringing everything along with it. So I think there's a lot of positive stuff in the last year. I think we just need to be careful that we don't have 500 companies all trying to do the same thing.
Thanks, Gregor. We'll come to you now, Christian.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, digital twin. To paraphrase what Gregor said there, it's quite a well-used term. I think it means a lot of different things to different people. Certainly, if you talk to certain tech people, developers, it means one thing. You talk to more commercial people, it means something else. So for us, we try to not use it too often and try more focus on the product that we're building, which is more sort of a portal working surface for heavy asset owners. But it is in some ways a digital twin because it's a data-driven product, which means the better quality you have your data, the more data you have, the more it resembles the asset you own. And sometime in the future, you can imagine that this virtual product, if you like, completely represents the asset. You could ask it very complex questions, and it would give you an answer back. I don't think the industry is there yet, but that's where I'm hoping we're going to get to. There's quite a lot of pieces that you need in place to get there, but that's sort of the holy grail, that you could ask this digital twin pretty much any question, and you can get a full description of how its behavior and look into the future. So that's sort of my my futuristic view of what a digital twin eventually will be. But But yeah, by that time we'll probably have a new buzzword that will be popular. So yeah, so that's my that's the gist of that.
To Gareth for our last definition, please.
Yeah, well, I'm just going to build upon what Colin said. Google it. I think Wikipedia will describe it as a virtual representation of a physical asset. I mean, otherwise we could maybe again just talk about this maybe too much. I think from our point of view, we didn't set out to build digital twins. We ride the wave of when digital twins can be used, if it's cool, if it's relevant or not, and that wave will continue to ripple away. And to expand upon what Gregor actually said in a previous question, this is an element of where we're sprinting potentially, and we have to watch. To compare it to another type or another technology, I remember working in operators when drones, flooded's probably the wrong word, but buzzed into the industry, and we were sold by the service companies, we will fly around your assets and we'll take photographs of your assets. And it was fantastic, great. We haven't done this before, but it quickly dawned, do we need photographs of our assets? What is the value? And then you went from the acceleration of a technology to the exploration of value. And I think that's the important bit. Where is the value? Tech for tech's sake isn't good. It's cool, but it's not valuable to a business environment.
Yeah, absolutely. So looking at the future, Christian, we'll come back to you now and ask, could you share any examples of how new digital technologies are being implemented and maybe some examples of some emerging tech that you see impacting the sector moving forward?
Yeah. So the emerging tech, I think it's, most of us will quickly jump to blockchain or deep learning or all these fancy stuff. And I'm sure they will play a part. Drones was mentioned here. I think at some point in time there will be value there, but I'm also a little bit skeptical right now to what that is. I think one part of technology which I feel often is sometimes a little bit downplayed is cloud development. And I've been working in this space for the last pretty much a decade, and the changes I've seen has just been quite incredible. And I look at some of these, if you look at modern tools and methods and deployment methods, I mean, if you were to build the way we build software today, if you were to do that, you arguably on a massive scale, you couldn't do it 15 years ago or 10 years ago. It was very hard. It required really large, well-functioning software organizations. And today you can have fairly small organizations which can deploy software at a massive scale. And I think we've only seen tip of the iceberg of what we can do in the cloud. So I'm super excited to see what that's going to look like in 10 years. And I really think it is really quite extraordinary what you can do today. So I think that's a little bit downplayed. And I think it's still quite immature, the cloud. So that's going to be fun to see. Now, specifically, an area that we've looked at quite a lot, and which I think we are going to see more of, pointing back to my digital twin and can you ask it a complex question, is, how do you describe behavior? And and over the last 100 years, we have a lot of first principle models, simulators that quite well describe a lot of processes that we know. And then you have the advent of machine learning. And some people might say that these are sort of clashing. I don't think they are. I think we can use the power of both of them. You don't need machine learning to describe process that we understand quite well. And so this combination, which I've seen referred to as hybrid analytics, I quite like that word. I think that can be really, really powerful because for sure with some of these modern tools like machine learning, they're very good at certain things. They're very good at optimization. They're very fast. First principle models are typically slow. As you can imagine, you can sort of combine these two to start getting what I really want is like how do you get behavior of these complex processes, complex assets, into your twin, for lack of better words. Yeah.
Cool. I mean, I think it's new tech is something that we could talk about for hours. But I think for the tech companies, one of the challenges to that is in selling your new innovative projects and products to customers and the adoption of those. Gregor, I'm going to come to you now. How do you get around those barriers in terms of selling a new product that people maybe don't understand?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Difficult to sell anything, I think, without showing a value. I think the customers are smart enough to know that if they're going to invest, they need to have a positive return. They need to see some value from it. If it might be production optimization, or it might be a saving on an offshore vessel of 2 days. I think the approach we've taken actually is that we're not trying to do everything new. The customers have, the operators have a lot of tools already. They've got flow assurance tools, they've got reservoir simulation tools. Some of them, especially when it comes to drilling and reservoir, where there's a huge value in percentage gains, integrating those in a new way, or at least allowing an operator to access data from different sources in one portal or one interface can actually be as good as creating a new digital tool, because you're now contextualizing information. You're maybe providing an operational engineer, not just integrity data, but historical video information, maybe from SWORD's group, some information on production optimization, some dashboarding, some integrity or condition monitoring from other sources, and pulling that together is actually maybe the first step, because it's tools and data sets the operators have and use, but you're just allowing a new way of using it. And I think we see a lot more gain in that, because it takes away that fear of sort of having to go all in with a new digital platform, and with tens of millions of dollars in investment and new data platforms and cloud solutions, that we can actually do some things very quickly with the data they have, and then build on that as the use cases come through, as the operators gain some confidence. I think there's still a struggle within to get some sort of penetration of a new product or platform, is that even within the operators, we have all these different groups. So if you're discussing with a concept development or a drilling team, it's a very different discussion than you would with an execution project team or an operational team. The users are different, the data sets are different. They're often siloed, that the handover between the groups is often very stressful and difficult, data-wise and also from a sort of personality-wise. You have very discrete groups with their own budgets. So I think that's, that is a struggle to sell new tech. But I think the minute you can get a super user or a supporter on the other side, you get that internal drive. Someone's able to demonstrate some value, and then that's when it can really accelerate. But there's always that initial barrier I think we spoke about earlier.
Thanks. Would anyone else on the panel like to come in on around our emerging tech and any of the points raised? Yep, Colin.
So I really like what Gregor said there around, technology needs to have a business case. There needs to be value at the end of the journey. But I think what a lot of companies forget is that technology enriches other technology when it works together. And we've seen a massive growth through API. I'm sure everyone's fed up hearing about APIs, but integration is a huge market sector just in itself. And I think companies have kind of got to move away a little bit from looking in silos and looking at one project at a time for where the value is, and start looking at the broader business value and what happens when you connect these systems and you build a bigger ecosystem of things that work together to solve more complex problems. I think back in the 90s, when looking at artificial intelligence as another emerging technology trend, I read constant SBE papers looking at how neural nets could be used in one shape or form to solve one problem. The conclusions in every paper was, it's great, but we need more data. We need to enrich it with more information. And through what we're seeing now with data lake development, everything moving to the cloud, data being more accessible and more integratable or integrable, whatever the word is, we're starting to see a space where machine learning can really take off, a platform for growth for these emerging technologies. And it was mentioned as well, blockchain. I really believe that we've just partnered with a startup called Smart Chain Services to develop a data to payment solution to completely transform how data is used at an operational level all the way through to payment in an automated fashion. I think blockchain hasn't quite had its day yet. It's gone through that peak of inflated expectations, but I think in the next few years we'll see real growth in the space. So really fascinating to see how that develops over the next few years.
I think so. We're certainly seeing lots of interest from new startup companies in the area of blockchain, which is really exciting. There has been a comment from Dave Lynch that the energy sector is trailing other sectors in digital, and that perhaps we need to look outside the sector for insight and lessons on how to better create the strategies and accelerate the change, and how best might we do that. Would anyone like to comment on that just now? We can save it till later. Sorry, Gregor, did you have your hand up there? Oh, or Colin? Gregor?
I think I can comment on that one pretty quickly. I mean, maybe it's a point towards the digital twin guys. What we see a lot is there's a lot of digitalization towards platform activity. Rigs that are fixed installations that have got great comms infrastructure. When we're working in the drilling sector and you're working in areas where you've got more remote operability, you're working on mid or MEO or geo satellite constellations, it's harder to digitally transform when you can't access the data. It's not readily available to you. And I think there's a load of fantastic tech at the rig in terms of robotics, control system development, to really automate as far as possible in energy, especially on onshore. You can see fully automated rigs now. And I think the industry is catching up, but we do have a bad reputation for not handling our data particularly well and not, managing change particularly well. But I think we are catching up. But I do think we do need to look out at other sectors as well, and, use open innovation as a platform to bring other entities, businesses and markets into the energy space.
Thanks. Stuart?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and just to chip in there, I think Dave has raised a really good point. I think our industry, our industry is starting to do that. First of all, going back to the question earlier about where we do we have a global recruitment market now effectively for these skill sets, which is obviously going to cause and create organic growth through bringing in new visions and insights from other industries. But also, I know that there's actively cohorts and collaborations being set up to drive that, such as Energy Tech, for example, which I'm lucky enough to be part of, which is a group and a consortium of people from all different companies in our sector. And we're lucky enough to gain insights from people that have, I'll use the word transformation, right? Transformation projects, digital transformation projects in other industries, sharing their insights and their learnings and where they've succeeded, but also where they've failed, which is also an important thing to recognize and reflect upon. So yes, we do need to do it. There are some great initiatives that exist. If nobody knows what the Energy Tech is, it's also what Gareth mentioned earlier, the Barclays Eagle Labs supported group. Take a look at that, because that is one of the best examples in our industry of that being done.
Thanks, Stuart. I'll just put in a little plug here. We're actually recruiting for cohort 2 for Energy Tech at the moment, so launching in February next year. So if anyone's keen to find out more about that, then please let me know.
Yeah.
And with that, yep, sorry, Gregor, on you go.
I was just going to add, I mean, there are some, we probably put ourselves down quite a bit, but I mean, the oil and gas is pretty unique as well. And we need to, I think, understand there are some differences. We don't have, millions of units out there that we can monitor and do machine learning on data. Often every project is completely different, whether it's from the reservoir or the equipment used. So it's something that's maybe not discussed a lot, but some kind of trying to gather some experience and knowledge bases out there, because we've got a lot of good experience that will leave the industry. People with even grayer hair than mine will be going. And we need to make sure that we're not losing a lot of that experience and then relying on a machine learning tool to replace him or her. And again, back to as many Colin's point was the open APIs. We do talk about open APIs a lot, but a platform similar to Colin's or Future-Ons or maybe Intelligent Plants, you can have a new graduate could develop a fantastic app, a best-in-class pipeline monitoring application. And use it, and he should be, or she should be able to use it in the industry. You shouldn't have to join a massive digital conglomerate or or a cloud-based company, he should be able to, or she should be able to just build a tool and sell it with some blockchain protection, and make some money. But it doesn't. We should be really open to this kind of idea, rather than close it up to just a few 5 or 6 key digital players in oil and gas.
Thanks. So from the futuristic view and the emerging tech, and we're going to bring everyone back down to earth now and back to basics. We are going to ask our panel about the importance of data management. And I think that for most businesses, this is the fundamental start of your digital transformation journey, and potentially one of the hardest pieces of it. Now, we've got a few experts in this area on our panel, so we'll get straight to them. And Jared, I'm going to come to you first. What are the most important things that our audience should know when it comes to data management?
Yeah, data management sometimes perceived as the poor red-headed stepchild of digital transformation, but it's not. It really is a key component. Look, data management is never going to be a keynote speech for a CEO. It's just not. However, becoming data-driven has been in a number of CEOs' keynote speeches. So the paradox here is you can't become data-driven without having strong data management and governance in place. So you really have to ask the question, how accurate do you want your data to be for you to make the right decisions from it? And also, how accessible do you want the data to be for your people to want to use it? So from our experience in SWORD, in working with data-driven organizations, there tends to be a high-performing data management function in there that plays 3 key roles for me in what we're discussing around digital transformation. So the first one is really around improving the data foundations so that the new and emerging technologies that we're just talking about can leverage those data sources and derive value and insight. Now, this may come from converting to machine-readable formats. It might be data mining. It might be data veracity. It's lots of things, and it's really going to depend on the individual use case for that business. Secondly, it's really around improving access to data across the organization. So looking to make it searchable and contextualized where necessary, or managing it effectively in what might be a corporate repository. And lastly, and for me the quite important bit, is around improving data behaviors from the top down. I think Colin talked on that with regards to culture. Everyone has a role to play in good data governance and ultimately having a healthy data culture, but it's going to need champions throughout the business to help sort of drive it where it needs to be. So for me, that's why the data management is one of the most important fundamentals required for digital transformation, Jen.
Thanks, Jared. I think everyone is now going to be hoping to meet you in the networking session to get more advice from you. Gregor, I'm going to come on to you now, and I'd like to look at the importance of data management as the industry data standards emerge. What do you think that means for businesses and for the potential for their data?
Unfortunately, Jen, it means a lot of spreadsheets at the moment. I mean, there was a huge sort of announcement a few years ago, I think, at some of the Norwegian conferences on data liberalization or openness of data, which was great. I mean, I think it was driven by Aker BP, and I think everyone sort of embraced that. And I think we've seen a much wider uptake on access to data. So from the operators allowing access to data lakes, allowing access to model data, to reservoir data and production data, to do something with it. I think the problem is without any kind of socialization of that data or making the connections between the data sets, it doesn't matter how open you are, you've just got a huge lake full of data. So the standards, although it's not a very exciting topic, as Jared's mentioned, and not many people want to sit around a beer talking about metadata, but it's key because we need to be able to share data between a flow assurance simulation and a pipeline design tool and SSDM pipeline survey file. So it's key. And there are groups out there we should all sort of support, I think, and take advantage. There's the OSDU group working on data models. So mainly from reservoir, but now they're looking at pipelines, risers, renewable information. There's the CFOS group within IOGP who are developing reference data libraries for projects, including Subsea now. So we've been working with Total and Equinor on the reference data library for that. And these sort of, I think if we all get behind these standards as much as we can, or at least acknowledge and support them, and agree to sort of implement them, we've got a fantastic foundation for this kind of collaborative future that I think we're going to have to get into.
Thanks. And following on from that point, the TLB's data and digital survey also identified a key barrier that the industry needs to overcome, and that's more data sharing around companies who are competitors today, which requires brave leadership, taking the first steps and creating that environment where they understand the shared benefits to catalyse action. Colin, I'm going to come to you now. Are you seeing that start to happen?
I think information transparency is critical for the sector to transform. If we look at emissions management, we look at scope 3 emissions in particular, and you look through the supply chain network on, how can I make better decisions to reduce my emissions if I can get better control of my supply chain with sharing data in a unique and centralized kind of way. So I think that these barriers will start to be, whether it's pushed by regulation or legislation, we will start to see them being broken down. And I think companies are realizing that to be more digitally mature, you need to be in an environment where you can share information with your peers, even with your competitors to some degree, to look at performance holistically, see where you sit as a business and where the whole sector can improve. And I think whilst we've been in a massively competitive industry for 30 years, we are now starting to see, okay, how can we change the whole industry together to benefit us all? And it does take strong leadership. It does take a different mindset in leadership. In order to share data externally, you must internally need to have really good control of how quality your information is, how well it's being used and analyzed internally. And that foundation sets you up a great environment to share your data with other companies. So I think most companies are getting towards that goal, but the internal control has to happen first.
Thanks. Following on from that, Christian, I'm going to come to you now to ask you to talk a little bit about digital maturity and what you think the importance of that is to what a company can do with their data.
Yeah, so that would be sort of almost paraphrasing what Jared, Gregor, and Colin have said. But I guess I could add some topspin to that, which would be, because we tend to talk about sort of, because if a company is going to be data driven, well, obviously then you need the data, and I find often that these companies talk about this in a binary format. Is it available? Is it not? Right? So is there an API or is it not? But in my mind, there's a lot more grayscale and gray tone to this. And I can see that for a lot of these companies have a long way to go to, let's say, even if we were to take an API, how advanced is that? What kind of questions can you ask that? How can you retrieve the data? How much data can you retrieve? Do you have any idea about sort of data lineage, data quality? And so what I realize is that I think it's not a one-off process for these companies that have a lot of data. This is a continuous process to make their data not only liberated, but make the quality better, so on and so forth. Because what they're going to end up with is the quality from the services they're buying is going to become better. It kind of comes with a data-driven, if you have a data-driven sort of business, well, the better the quality, etc., then the better the output. And that might sound obvious, but I find that sometimes the industry, some of these data owners don't really understand that, and I feel that they're not investing enough into what I would then call digital maturity to get that grayscale towards white, I guess, if black is old school.
Thanks. I think often restating an obvious statement is very, very helpful in helping to embed that the sentiment. Now, just before we leave this topic, I'd like to mention data security, which is obviously a topic large enough for its very own event, but which we're going to just sneak in here at the end. And Stuart, I'm going to come to you for this one. How important do you think data security is? And is it the kind of fear of losing control of data that can be a barrier to collaboration?
You got any easier questions? Wow. It's an interesting topic. Again, I'm sure everyone in this group has all got their own stories that they can tell about this, right? I going back to sort of Gareth touched on it earlier. I think the security element as a barrier or a perceived barrier in the industry is changing. I think more companies are sharing data with other parties, providing they can add value back to them. So I think and I am seeing signs of that definitely changing. And again, I always try and go back to a similar example that might not necessarily be related to digital tech. So operators, for example, for years have shared sensitive data with consultants that do things like reservoir mapping or well analysis to anticipate how much potential production there is, right, from assets and wells. And operators pretty much readily share that data with those consultants under NDA, of course. But it's really interesting. It's almost like there's a phobia where if you want to access that data to put it in an application to do condition monitoring on that asset, so you can potentially see in advance before a failure occurs. There's a phobia about making potentially the same data available to do that analysis. But I think that is changing now, thankfully, and I think it will continue. Just to pick up on some of the other bits of the discussion just now, I think making an industry standard for data, usually loosely termed, for example, what the example Greg was using, I think that's a great step. But again, if you look around at other areas in the rest of our industry, those kinds of initiatives take years to achieve. I'm not saying that's going to happen with this, but I've been actively involved in standards for NACE, for example, around welding and things like that, and they just take so long to get approved and get implemented. And I know there's been other initiatives in the control space around protocols, making standard open protocols for controls technology. Getting those standardized industry projects off the ground can take a really long time, and I think while that continues in the digital space and the data space that we all work in, I think we need to keep both options open. And I also don't think we will ever reach a point in our industry where data's shared openly, in the sense that, let's not forget, operators compete with other operators. You see it now even more so in wind, the aggressive bidding that's happening to get real estate to build offshore wind farms. Anything those operators can do to get a competitive advantage, to get a greater return on investment for that wind farm, they'll leverage. So if you can give them a competitive advantage through a digital solution, then great. But that doesn't mean that, as the supplier of that to, say, Equinor, that they may or may not want that to go to BP, and sharing that data between the two. So I think we need to stay realistic in terms of what sharing is. And yes, we all know the theoretical benefits of mass sharing of data. So yeah, it's an interesting topic, and I think it will continue to evolve as well.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks. Now, we are running close for time, so I'm going to jump to questions from the audience. So we've got one here from Samir Biko. Digital transformation is about hiding technology from the users. What would be the key distinguishing capability for a business to differentiate itself after a successful digital transformation? Who would like to take that? Jared, you've unmuted. Does that mean you're going for this one?
It'd be great to catch up with Samir, maybe in the networking, because I'm going to have to disagree. I don't think digital transformation is about hiding technology from the users. I think it's about enabling the users. I think it's about sort of getting users to trust the technology. It's about getting the users to evolve with the technology. I don't think we want to hide it from them at all. A lot of this is around the culture. It's around working with the users on the adoption component. Yeah. So how do we go through that change process with the users within the business to get them using the technology for their benefit? I certainly don't think we want to be hiding the technology from them. So, but yeah, I'd be more than happy to pick up that conversation further.
Thanks. Would anyone else like to comment on that one, or will I leave you? Oh, Gareth, yes, please.
Yeah, I think the premise of the question is about the successful deployment of a digital technology. You then are not aware that you're using it, and you could apply that to potentially everyday life. You no longer think about it. So maybe that is something that can be gauged and part of a success criteria. But I guess the other way, and as to echo Jared, the other way to look at it is no, let's not hide it, because then it's not transparent, and then there's a potential trust, or how does a black box element that comes in. So an interesting question, undoubtedly, though.
I'd just add, I've got plenty of productivity apps on my iPhone, which I probably haven't opened for a couple of years since downloading them, because it didn't make me more productive at all. So I think there's a risk that we assume that we don't have to change as engineers or specialists. We can keep doing what we want, but the digital tools will do everything for us. And if we're really going to do this properly, we need to change as well. So it's the way we work, not just the way we work, but the way we interact with people, the way we interact with clients or partners. That just having a digital tool isn't going to necessarily make things better.
Colin, did you have your hand up as well?
Yeah, I was going to add, I think, I honestly believe the word digital at the front of digital transformation is problematic. I think when you throw digital in there, people assume it's IT-related projects or it's all about digital. But really, you're changing the business in its entirety. Digital transformation is business transformation. And I think that we should change the commentary, and we should drop the word digital and maybe call it business transformation or something else. But I think, when users start to be impacted by technology, they will start to see their roles transform. And that's where the people, the process, and the business starts to come into play. So it's something that's really on my mind all the time is, how does our technology impact the end user? And, how can we get people reskilled and upskilled to prepare for that time when a lot of the stuff they do today has changed their role quite significantly. And I think that in the northeast of Scotland and wider in the UK, each company and each individual's got a responsibility to upskill themselves to drive and be part of this big, this great crew change that's been knocking on the door for 20 odd years.
Thank you. Right. We also have a question from Connor O'Leary. How do we support our operators to secure value-adding solutions from SME providers in a saturated supply chain? Any takers?
That's a great question. Actually, I think the operators are more open than before. I think going back to the Stuart's sort of feedback on the standards, I actually found the operators were more willing to share than others. We found the problem with building the standards was the SMEs weren't willing to share, because you get into the situation of contractual issues. Obviously, there's a business approach as well. So I think this idea of, I keep going back to collaboration, but at least openness and integration. So we're integrating with Kongsberg Digital, but also with other partners such as Bentley. I mean, these are competitors in the same region, but they're all agreeing to work with us, even though there's maybe a competitive edge seen there. But they see the bigger picture. I think they see the fact that they don't have a perfect solution in every area, but they may fill out 80% of the need, and the other group take the 20. So I think we'll see a big change or hopefully see a change in sort of these contractual strategies and allow a sort of more wider group of providers to work on a project together.
Great.
I don't know if that answers the question. It answers the question I had in my head. But,
Okay, Gareth, do you want to comment on that as well?
Yeah, I think the saturation, I think, is an issue, and how do we support our operators? I think how operators engage down through the supply chain with all businesses, and this is maybe controversial, needs a complete overhaul. And I think COVID actually shone a light on a lot of that. The oil and gas industry there's old school elements to what we do. We turn up at events, we have stalls, we talk in this, and that all stopped. So there was a void created in that space, and then you look to the vehicles for engagement, FPAL, Achilles, all these things, and are they fit for purpose, and are they doing the job, and are they allowing small companies who have potentially very valuable solutions actually engage and discuss their ideas and describe their value proposition to operators? I would say no. I'd say that needs improvement. And I think it can only come through the service companies and operators working together to say, and I can see movement in there already. There's change actually happening. Whether it'll ever be fit for purpose, probably not. But there's improvement required there.
Thanks, Jared.
Yeah, maybe just a quick one on that. Obviously, in relation to the term sort of saturation in the supply chain, I think it's worth remembering as well that, and I think a number of us touched on this, there's no one single organisation in supply chain or in the industry overall that has the answer. And if I recall, one of the main findings in the UKCS State and Digital Maturity Survey, there was a big recognition that more collaboration was required, but there was actually very little evidence of it actually taking place. Now, I know that the needle's moved somewhat over the past 12 months plus since that survey was undertaken, but I think the supply chain as well would benefit from further collaboration, because I think they've got integrating parts that start to build some of the key solutions that the industry needs. So I think it was Gareth that might have mentioned the saturated component, and to a degree, I agree. But I also think the supply chain can do a lot more and benefit the industry more by collaborating on their individual components into ultimately what the overall solutions look like.
Okay, I'm going to jump to another question just for a quick response. Robin Parkinson's asked if the blockchain has been mentioned and inflation is an important global consideration with multi-currency work. Does digital currency fit into any of the panelists' digital transformation strategies? If it's not, this will be quickly answered, but do any of you want to comment on that one? Colin?
Yeah, so I mean, the concept of digital currency is really interesting, and we're definitely pursuing and looking at what can we use as a mechanism for tracking costs and spend between organizations across a group of companies. We're also looking at blockchain technology for carbon credit schemes and trading carbon between renewable companies and oil and gas companies to try and drive towards net zero. So, blockchain and smart contract technology has got a huge part of our strategy. The cryptocurrency element, maybe not so much. We haven't thought about, doing a day rate in Bitcoin for our rigs yet, but maybe that'll come in 5 or 10 years. I know I heard an NFL football an NFL football player is now getting paid in Bitcoin rather than in US dollars. So I think more and more it's happening, but like I say, blockchain smart contracts are there, but cryptocurrency, not for me.
Thanks, Colin. Stuart?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question, and I think there's so much potential there for disruption at all different levels in our industry. Ultimately, to sort of build on Colin's point, it depends on who the owners are of the business, right? As to what's a form of acceptable payment, right? Private equity is still, in my opinion, still very traditional. Even with the increase in things like partnerships that we're seeing happening in our industry just now, and collaborations, right, and part ownership of other companies, that's pretty unheard of in the private equity world. Typically, they like to buy something, build it, sell it on. So to also throw in the mix, well, but now we want to contract and get paid in a cryptocurrency. That's pretty alien to a lot of private equity companies. Not all, right? From my knowledge and opinion. So I think there's going to be. I think you're going to see a shift from top down and also bottom up. I think there's an opportunity for startups to take the initiative and go for that as a differentiator. And I think similarly, private equity firms have potentially got an opportunity there to be the first ones that adopt that as well. So I think there's so much potential there for disruption. The elephant in the room, of course, is are those currencies stable enough just now? And as a whole, that's a topic in itself. So yes, I think there's potential there. And there's so many different factors to consider whether or not it will be in the strategy.
Thanks, Stuart. Now, I'm conscious that we've only missed one message and one question. So I know that everyone's keen to get into the networking session, but in the interest of completeness, I just want to pose Gary's question very, very quickly. Should operators use ISO 27001 partners or platforms for trust and security? Would anyone like to quickly address that just briefly before we summarize and shut down?
For me, it's a short answer, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can comment on that as well, having implemented it. I mean, it's part of the answer. My worry with all of these type of ISO standards is that you kind of get this warm, nice, fuzzy feeling, but they don't cover the complete picture. Yes, it is a way of working, and it assumes that you have a certain standard and a certain way of working. I've witnessed quite a few companies who only changed to a zero trust regime after they had massive cyber attacks, which is something they could have done in advance. And even when you mention to some companies, they're far from it, right? So these standards I think are a good driver to get companies in the right direction, but there really is no silver bullet. And I sometimes get this feeling that, well, you just install antivirus and then you're good to go. Cybersecurity is a pretty complex area, and it's not only just about sort of code and what type of IT technology you have. It's as much an organizational way of working. So anyway, you pushed the wrong button there. I could have talked about that for a while, but it is it's a really important topic. And
maybe you'll get matched up in the networking, and then you can continue the discussion.
I don't know if I want to.
So, but on that note, I think I'm very conscious of time, and I'm sure that the audience are very keen to meet panel members in the networking. So without further ado, I would just like to say a huge thanks to our panel for your time and insights today. So thanks to Christian Muller, Colin Dawson, Gareth McIntyre, Stuart Harvey, Jared Owen, and Gregor Deans. Many thanks too to our audience this afternoon for your time and for your questions. So we would love for you now to join us for some networking. If you click on the networking icon on the left-hand side of your screen, you will be taken to our networking room where you will be randomly matched to each other for the next hour or so. So I hope to see you in there, and thank you very much.